Kia ora. Welcome everybody. It's great to see so many people, so many of you online today. I'm just going to get us started this morning, opening with a karakia to call in positive energies, and then I can introduce our speakers. Tūtaua mai I runga, tūtaua mai I raro, tūtaua mai I roto, tūtaua mai I waho, kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumie, hui, tai kie. Well, kia ora and welcome to the Evidence to Practice session. Ko Cheryl Han toku ingoa, he tangata tiriti yoho. I'm with the Centre for Family Violence and Sexual Violence Prevention and really happy to be welcoming you here today. In this version of Teams that we're using, you're only going to see the presenters. You won't be able to see each other, unfortunately, but you can ask questions. So have a look at the top. There's a Q&A function, and in there you can post any questions that you have for the presenters. Our presenters today are Joe Robertson, Holly Jean Brooker and Rory Birkbeck, and they're the authors of a recently released report, The Digital Sexual Landscape, Children and Young People in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And so we'll have a chance to hear some of your questions or hear the responses to some of your questions, and they're going to be facilitated by Sarah Townsend, who's a Principal Advisor here at the Centre for Family Violence and Sexual Violence Prevention. The Q&A or whatever you put in there is public, just reminding you about that. And we'll get through as many of the questions as we can. Just a reminder that we want this to be a safe and inclusive space. These sessions are going to cover issues around sexual violence and family violence. So please do what you need to do to look after yourself and get support if you need it. We'll be posting the links to the support lines and the help portals in the Q&A, so have a look at those, and you'll be able to phone, online chat, or reach out to people if you want more information. So now I'd like to introduce our presenters. We have Joe Robertson. Joe's a sex therapist with a Masters of Science in Medicine, specialising in sexuality, relationships, and the cultural influences shaping sexual norms. She's got over 15 years experience in health, education, and counselling, including working as a child and youth trauma counsellor and helping people navigate the online sexual experiences. We are hoping to be joined by Holly soon. Holly's a child online safety advocate and educator, communicator, and working in PR and media specialist. She's got a background as high school teaching and 15 years in comms and parenting education, and is currently completing her Masters in Public Policy. And then we have Rory Birkbeck. Rory's the co-founder and the CEO of Safe Surfer. He's a tech innovator and a father of two who's been developing child safety online solutions for a decade. Rory has also partnered with Samsung to create a kids-safe smartphone and published a book for primary school children around online safety. So we're so privileged to have you here with us today. What I'd like to do is just hand over to you now, Joe, and to Rory, and we're hoping that we'll be bringing in Holly if she's able to get in. Thanks so much for joining us today.
You are very welcome. Yeah, we've had some tech issues, so we're hoping that Holly will jump on at some point. Rory, are we up? And maybe Cheryl, can you give me a thumbs up when we're all set on now? Yeah, awesome, cool. Hey, so firstly, really thank you all for being here. I want to acknowledge that many of you have already done lots in the youth space, potentially in the online space. It's likely that you've done work in the areas that we're going to talk about and maybe even have more knowledge than us. I want to preemptively just apologize if at any point it feels like we haven't captured the work that everyone else is doing. There's so much happening and we aren't able to speak to all of it in the workshop in the way that we'd really love to. Rory's controlling the slides. There we go. So Rory, Holly and I are going to share the presentation between us, and this is based on our relevant fields and how each of us focused our research. Rory and I will share the most in the first half, and then Holly is going to jump in and share lots of the recommendations around reform and more particularly policy.
Kia ora. Yeah, why this report? So really, it's for ACC and for government partners to discover the emerging insights. So what's happening in the online space? Where are we going? What do we need to know? And what can we do about it? It's really a fraction of what's in the report itself. And obviously the report's actually been made public now through the government inquiry. And so, you can actually look at it yourselves. It's a synthesis of evidence that's been drawn between sort of 2018 and 2025 data. And we really want to give credit to Nikki Denham from the Light Project. She's also a contributing author, and she's actually contributed a number of sections in this report.
So this is what we're going to cover in terms of the online landscape. These are all the areas that young people have online sexual experiences. I should note, sorry, that this is all the topics, or I guess the spaces that's covered in the report, and we're pulling from some of those to share in this presentation. So we won't get to, for example, mainstream media, we won't get to, books that young people are reading, but most of this we're going to speak to. Lots of you will probably know what porn is like for kids now. So this is just some really high level data. Important to note that the 4 largest pornography sites receive nearly 9 billion global visitors monthly. So that surpasses traffic to major platforms like Amazon and TikTok combined. This is a massive industry. It's legal. It's rated 18 plus. However, there's no age verification. So just one of the thousands of sites have a black box, which says, are you over 18? And you can obviously do a tick box, but there's no other verification measures for young people. In terms of the content, we've got lots of data now around what young people will see when they go online. 46% is incestual, has some family themes. This is coming from the Classification Office data. 35% has non-consensual behaviour. Women, performers who are labelled teen or young, and our sexuality and gender diverse performers are much more frequently the targets of aggression. We've got some international quantitative data on youth exposure to CSAM and other illegal content like rape videos or bestiality. And the Classification Office release of research recently, it gives us much more insight into youth experience. So 9 to 14% of young people, and this is the international data, said that they were exposed to illegal content, which included child sexual abuse material, or what some people call child sexual exploitation material. 7% of them said they're exposed to illegal content every day that they go online, 11% informing their parents or caregivers, and just 9% reporting it to authorities. I was really sad to see how few young people talk to someone about what they've seen. Just speaking personally, a number of occasions when I've accidentally seen CSAM, it's been really, really impacting. Regarding other types of objectionable content, so bestiality content, rape content, when Holly and we started our advocacy work, a search result for rape porn led to 500 million results. Since then, we've started targeting the big tech companies, and they have done some work to reduce the videos that kids see. But perpetrators or creators of the content have been really what I would call slippery, and they've started hiding this illegal content behind unrelated images when someone searches for them. So you can see that image there on the bottom that says raped the young boy, and that's a video about that. However, it's behind an image of a woman in a bikini. Some people ask us if kids are looking for this content or if they're seeing it accidentally, and it's of course both. So they might overhear the word rape at school and go home to search it up to understand, or they can get sent it by someone else, a peer, for example. Animated content isn't always CSAM, and it isn't always objectionable. I want to make that really, really clear, but often has this quite childlike aesthetic and really aggressive depictions, for example, like having male monsters dominating or destroying women because they can push the boundaries of what's physically possible. And interestingly, in 2024, Gen Z, in terms of hentai, which is animated sexual content, viewership on Pornhub went up nearly 200%, doubling from 2023. So young people are definitely engaging with this, and much more than adults.
My interest was really around generative AI and what's happening and what's scaling in this space. So, we all love ChatGPT, which splashed onto our screens 2.5 years ago, and it quickly reached 100 million active users. But the research into the use of ChatGPT is obviously really new and really interesting. We found that 12% of user interactions on ChatGPT were for sexual role play, which was actually its second highest use. And this was according to a meta-analysis study of 1 million ChatGPT interactions, which was called Wild Chat. Users are easily able to jailbreak safety filters, as this research kind of shows, despite OpenAI's guidelines prohibiting sexual content involving minors. With young people in particular, an emerging trend that we really need to be aware of is the creation of synthetic relationships. So this is where you can create chatbot personas for friendship or fantasy. Imagine training a friend, choosing their persona, what they look like, their likes and their dislikes. And there's platforms such as Character AI and Replica AI that are really at the forefront of this trend. And what it shows us is that sexual AI relationships are not off limits for these platforms. They're allowing us and allowing users and young people to have not safe for work filters. I think we're all fully aware that big tech is trying to take our children's time and attention. But there's something more recently that they've been after. And do you know what it is? It's actually intimacy, or digital intimacy. And in some ways, the data that we have shows that they're well on their way to capturing it. So some insights into this. Character AI currently has an estimated 20 million active users globally, half of which are believed to be under 18. And then further to that, Character AI users are currently spending an average of 2 hours per day on the platform. And this is really significant because it is reaching higher levels of engagement than ChatGPT because of that intimacy. There's another emerging trend which has gone alongside this, which is sexual abuse by AI chatbots. So conversational AI platforms now, such as Character AI, have shown us that perpetrators can now also be synthetic without any financial, sexual, or human motive. And obviously this poses huge problems for scale. In 2024, there was a young person from Florida who committed suicide, and his parents took out a lawsuit against Character AI. Now, Tristan Harris, who's from the Humane Technology Coalition, actually said that Character AI acted human in very overt ways of being sexual, with Saywell, the young person, asking him to join her on the other side, ultimately leading to his suicide. So it was a persona from the Game of Thrones that he got involved with. Now we've got to ask ourselves, is this a one-off case? And I think what we see with this research is that there's evidence to suggest that there's a much larger and growing issue behind this. AI is moving really fast, and our research found a lack of age verification and content moderations on AI platforms. Further to this, there's now less moderation, and this was what the research really dug into, is that platforms now like Grok are even blurring the lines even further with nudify aspects. And you can see that on the screen there. They're also rated only 12 plus on the App Store. And then there's also going to be a fusing with VR in the future, which currently hasn't hit scale. So there's a lot to look out for kind of in this space.
So I don't think it'll be a surprise to anyone that social media is used really heavily by young people. The data shows, unfortunately, that when predatory people have access to kids, that they exploit them. So a third of all encounters young people have with content that they consider, in their own words, age-restricted, illegal, or harmful, unsafe, happens on social media channels. A third of children and young people now report having what's called an online sexual interaction, and a quarter of 9 to 12-year-olds happening much younger than when people expect. Social media content doesn't actually have to include nudity in order for it to give very, very clear sexual violence messaging. So an example of this is on the right. That's from TikTok, and it's of a boy squashing a drink bottle. And he says in the video, "This is how girls like to be choked." There's an abundance, a lot of sexual strangulation content on TikTok. Social media filtering is never going to manage that. So we can't moderate our way out of people seeing a drink bottle. There's no nudity or any reason for it to be filtered out. So the only way to stop most 12, 13, 14-year-olds seeing this is actually by having minimum ages on the platforms. However, we all know that that's really complicated. And I know everyone listening will have quite a lot of feelings or thoughts about that. Social media has also become the place where porn performers and the porn industry advertises their content. So think of it as like the digital storefront for their product, trying to lead young people off onto other more explicit sites. Because you go to the consumer, you don't wait for the consumer to come to you.
In gaming, 3 of the top 5 platforms were actually gaming platforms. And all 3 of these online games have upwards of about 100 million active users. And Roblox obviously claims a lot more. Now, half of teen gamers are currently having a harmful experience, according to the eSafety Commissioner in Australia. And the amount of times that kids are also spending on games has increased. There's actually been a 65% increase in gaming time for the 0 to 8-year-old bracket in 4 years. In addition to that, you'll obviously all be aware of what's been happening with Roblox, and our research found similar. You know that there's a thriving and active child exploitation marketplace where users lure in children by offering Robux, the platform's in-game currency. There's also a rise in games like the series Grand Theft Auto, which glorifies sexual violence and is being used by young people. Some of the images on the screen there, obviously from Roblox itself, with some of the in-game platforms that you can get access to. And then also a recent campaign from a game called No Mercy, which was on the Steam store. The game was found to be a rape simulator that contains incest. Moving on to dating and friendship apps, many adults experience dating app facilitated sexual violence, or DAFTA, and there's actually been some solid research around it. So 69% of dating app users have faced online sexual harassment, and this includes unwanted sexual harassment, unsolicited explicit photos, and gender-based aggression. Now, if this is the case for adults, how do we feel about kids being on there? Well, actually, alarmingly, in the US, almost 1 in 5 children are on dating apps like Tinder, Grindr, Hinge, or Bumble. There's also been a trickle-down effect with the design of dating apps to friendship apps, with apps like Kid Tinder, which are drawing, children online. And there was actually a meta-analysis study done in the US of friendship apps, where regulators found a presence of predatory behavior and a lack of regulation. So we've got to ask ourselves, what is stopping an adult going on a child friendship app currently? And it's just a tick box. In this section, we're going to kind of cover the known harms, and we're also going to give you a bit of youth voice. According to the New Zealand data we do have, there's been a 550% increase in grooming reports on Snapchat since 2021. But we've got to ask ourselves, is this just improved reporting? And if we look at some of the other data that we have, such as 2/3 of children interact daily online with people they don't know, despite online concerns for grooming, and 1 in 3 minors, 9 to 12 years old, have an online sexual interaction, and in 1 in 5 cases it's likely to be an adult, we don't believe it's just about reporting. Now, we know this is extremely complex space, and it's also made increasingly complex by the fact that perpetrators will meet potential victims on moderated platforms and move them onto less moderated platforms like messaging apps, with image sharing capabilities and end-to-end encryption, such as Snap, Insta, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, iMessage. In this slide, there's a lot of data. So we're just going to give you a quick 20 seconds to just read some of this information. It's also available in the report that you can view afterwards, but we'll just give you a little bit of time just to quickly read this and absorb it.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Great. So youth voice, what we hear again and again from young people is really clear. They're coming across harmful stuff online, often at young ages, and it makes them uncomfortable, and adults aren't talking to them about it. So young people are watching porn to learn about sex, which we know is problematic. They're also looking for connection and validation, and AI characters are stepping in to fill that gap. What they actually want is simple. They want to be kept safe from harmful content, and they want to have trusted adults talking to them about the online space.
So hopefully at this point you're feeling the urgency of how much intervention is really needed in this field, but just in case you're not feeling the urgency, we're seeing grooming online increase at really horrendous rates, and not only is the prevalence high, but so is the extreme nature of the abuse and the exploitation that's happening. So with sites that have, just to highlight that stat at the top, there's been an 1,800% increase in what we call self-generated CSAM featuring 7 to 10-year-olds since 2019. So images and videos of a sexual nature of a 7 to 10-year-old that they created themselves with a predator on the other side of the screen. Of those, of the content that they filmed themselves and shared online, 1 in 5 were considered category A, which includes penetration, bestiality, or torture. So this is really uncomfortable. It's really confronting. Internet Watch Foundation last year said that under 10s are being groomed like never before. I'm going to hand off to Holly now, who's going to kick us off on our recommendations after all of this.
Cool. So over the last 30 minutes, Rory and Joe have covered some pretty heavy stuff that our kids are facing online. This next section covers off how New Zealand is addressing this and what is happening internationally. So I'll be really honest, for Joe and I working in research, education and advocacy, it can be easy to feel a little bit hopeless at times, to think that nothing's going to change. We've known about the growing issues of online harm for so many years, and we haven't seen strong leadership or decisive action being taken yet. So we really want to approach this next section with a hopeful lens. We've seen some creative campaigns or initiatives from some government departments and some grassroots organisations. We've got some really good research showing where harm occurs. We've seen the power of advocacy and some changes made as a result of this. And with grassroots campaigning, we're now seeing a groundswell appearance who are starting to understand and engage with the need for change, and we're seeing increased interest politically. But we continue to have a band-aid approach, quick wins. We want to see the government looking at this systemically as a whole system, not just in isolated parts. As you'll know, I won't go into detail, I've got it all in the report, but New Zealand currently has 3 national strategies addressing family and sexual violence, child wellbeing and trafficking. And these are all really important, but there's a gap. None of them contain specific actions to addressing online harm to children. And that's a massive blind spot in our national approach. On top of that, our legislative and regulatory framework, that's such a mouthful, is dated, piecemeal, and simply not fit for today's online environment. So as a really quick overview, we have 2 main laws that deal with some harmful content and conduct. Both are reactive. They kick in after harm has already occurred. And for victims, the burden of proof is so high that many cases never get addressed. The laws are 30 and 10 years old. They're not designed to address things like AI, deepfakes, or the sheer scale of online content today. There's no platform accountability. Take last week, for example, the graphic video of Charlie Kirk's murder. Under our current law, showing the killing itself isn't enough to make the content illegal. For it to be classified as objectionable, the video also needs to promote or encourage violence. And that's a really high bar. Pornography is rated R18, yet there are no barriers to ensure that platforms prevent kids from accessing it. These key laws, the Films, Videos, Publications, Classifications Act and the Harmful Digital Communications Act, they overlap in part with the Crimes Act, the Defamation Act, the Harassment Act. This creates a confusing patchwork, making it even harder to regulate harm effectively. So what we see is that our institutional design lacks cohesion. Responsibility is scattered across multiple ministers, portfolios, agencies, and no one's holding the reins. No one's really accountable. When it comes to industry, big tech, New Zealand has no enforcement mechanism at all. Right now, platforms are left to self-moderate under a voluntary code, which it's been co-created by New Zealand Tech and NetSafe. But academics and global experts around the world are clear that self-regulation is no longer acceptable when it comes to protecting children from harm. New Zealand has attempted to address these gaps under various governments over the past 10 years. They've said themselves the approach is not fit for purpose. And, with 3-year terms and changing governments, child safety online seems to get caught up in campaigning and party policies, but it shouldn't. We really need to question the machinery of government to ensure that child safety is prioritised regardless of party policies. So just looking at this kind of snapshot, as we've seen in the report, there's some great initiatives at play in various departments and in the grassroots. There's some good intent. There are some amazing people striving to do really good work. But these efforts seem to happen in silos and they lack real support. One department might decide to launch a social campaign about nudes. Another group might run an education program. Sometimes they collaborate, but mostly they don't. We're seeing that leadership is really lacking in our advocacy work with Make Sense. We've consistently seen confusion, even within organisations, about who is responsible for what. The public often assumes, for example, that NetSafe can regulate big tech or hold platforms accountable, but they can't. That's not their mandate. Another example is school-funded filtering. Network for Learning, which is funded by the Ministry of Education, provides filtered internet into schools. Parents, teachers, principals, and school boards assume and trust that this means harmful content is being effectively filtered. It's not. Harmful content, including sometimes pornography, graphic violence, it can and does get through the filtering. Boards are responsible for this, for child safety, but they lack real understanding of what's happening and how to manage it. They're not tech experts. Another example, many believe that the DAA addressed all illegal content online. They don't. Their core focus is child sexual abuse material and terrorism. Task Force Ruru do incredibly important work, but their scope is narrow and industry aren't mandated to prevent harm. Until last year, our national child exploitation filter held by the DAA was blocking around 400 to 700 CSAM URLs updated manually. With some sustained grassroots advocacy, DAA now using the Internet Watch Foundation's machine learning block list, filtering up to 30,000 URLs that comes out of the UK. But even this is voluntary. ISPs are not mandated to block child sex abuse material. Other forms of illegal content, such as rape content, bestiality videos, which are found on search engines like Google and Bing, they're not being addressed at all. These are serious gaps. Next slide, please. The digital landscape has changed and we urgently need to do things differently, but we don't need to reinvent the wheel. This chart kind of benchmarks how far behind New Zealand is from comparable countries. Comparative policy analysis shows that Australia, the UK, Ireland, Canada, EU, they prioritise a strategic national approach to online safety. Canada's is currently in progress, with online safety legislation an agency or a commissioner leading the charge. and an independent regulator to hold industry accountable for harm. For example, since June, France has implemented a porn passport to prevent kids accessing porn sites with a double anonymity system, and AU and the UK are working towards this also. So while many of these specific online safety laws are relatively new, they are aligned in their approach, and we've seen some strong action from regulators on platforms with fines for causing harm. So we can absolutely draw lessons to build a framework that suits New Zealand's scale, culture, and constitutional framework, and we can collaborate with these countries to strengthen our focus. And of course, this all takes time. A quick win could be that we update the Films, Videos, Publications, Classifications Act and the HDCA to immediately expand expectations and include things like deepfakes and AI. We can draw lessons from Australia, the UK, France, implement age verification for adult or harmful content. But more band-aids don't work long term. So we must stand back and face the wider picture, building a robust framework that's agile, able to adapt as both tech and risk changes. It's essential. Overseas, we're seeing what strong leadership can look like. In the UK, David Wright, director of the UK Safer Internet Service, said, is that on that slide? No, it's on the previous one, but that's fine. He said, as the national centre, we are dedicated to making the UK the safest place in the world to be online. And there's another quote there from Karen Bradley. She says, behaviour that is unacceptable in real life should be unacceptable on a computer screen. And this is the kind of leadership we want to see here. We need this, bold, coordinated, and committed to putting children at the centre. Anything less than that is just not good enough. The second part of our presentation offers recommendations for a New Zealand-specific, child-centred approach to ensure that our kids are safer offline and online. So the following slides unpack our recommendations for change further. We've broken our recommendations into 3 sections. The first is big picture, so it's systems, leadership and learning. The second is capability and coordination, and the third is direct participant programs, action in the community. So we believe that New Zealand, it's very clear that we lack a decisive systemic child-centred approach, and I'll give a really kind of high level of the current situation and where New Zealand can take action. I am just thinking if we can skip to the next slide. No, sorry, go back. I don't have the slide deck in front of me. Cool. So the report really highlights the functions and purpose of the recommendations that we make. And we can see that there's political desire growing due to public awareness, and that's really positive and really hopeful. An ideal framework that we would really advocate for is a national strategy focused on child safety online, housed by a dedicated supporting body like a Centre for Children's Online Safety or a Department for Online Safety. We'd like to see clear policy mandates to ensure that platforms have a digital duty of care towards children with a long-term strategic vision. So not just reactive steps, but a long-term roadmap for lasting change. It requires a whole of government approach with cross-agency support and action. We'd like to see an independent regulator with an online commissioner leading the charge, making critical decisions. They need strong powers to investigate, to enforce safety standards, to handle complaints and require transparency from platforms, and to work closely with government agencies, young people, Māori, community and advocacy groups. And we really need to prioritise education and parental support. We need a narrow enough scope to ensure that free speech is not at risk, but be agile enough to reach emerging trends such as notify apps and character AI. Next slide, please.
So what technology can help? Well, I'm a tech guy, which means I've looked pretty much extensively all over the world at what kinds of technological solutions have been put in place. And some of these are pretty complex and hard to understand. So I'm going to try and condense quite a lot of complicated messaging into some very simple terms, because my assumption is that most of you haven't spent the last 10 years developing family filters. Now, digital technologies can provide opportunities for young people, but they also pose a broad range of harms, including to children's health and development, to privacy, security, and safety. So while acknowledging the complex, holistic solutions required to mitigate risks, my research really focused on technology solutions to prevent harms to young people through harmful content exposure or unsafe design features. Now, I wrote a whole section on technology solutions in the report, and really I kind of want to base them around three key pillars: legislation, innovation, and education. So in order to legislate, we really need to get the industry to adopt safety by design. Now, safety by design is a design-based approach. So there needs to be some minimum expectations set through codes of practice. It was developed by the Australian E-Safety Commissioner, and it's based previously off principles like privacy by design or safety by design. The following areas are really the critical areas for safety by design. So accountability and transparency. So we're talking about the need for audits and transparency, age-appropriate design, default safety settings, better reporting mechanisms, child-centered design, and privacy protections. I could probably go into an hour on each of these, but we all know that the reporting platforms themselves need much better reporting mechanisms for the way that young people interact with them and are dealt with within the platforms and how they are responded to. The default safety settings is more about what's our default position. So what are we willing to set as a line in the sand and say, when a young person comes on the platform, this is what is expected. So it's the safety features that come out of the box, the muting, the nudity detection or blurring, all of those types of features. And often safety guards have been retrofitted after the fact. And what safety by design is really saying is that it needs to be put in at the point of design. So when the very features or the platforms being rolled out in the first place is when the safety needs to be included. So the other part of the equation that is currently missing is innovation. So, this is obviously a massive piece, and Holly briefly mentioned about age verification, and we all know that the Australian government underwent an age verification pilot this year in lead up to the social media age restriction for 16 years that's coming in, and it's also something they're considering for adult sites. So a final report was released, and obviously, as New Zealand, we're watching really closely to see what comes in December when Australia switches on age verification for these social media platforms. There's also been a number of other platforms that have introduced age assurance or are planning to introduce age assurance based on key indicators. So Apple and others have made announcements. Platforms like Meta have kind of suggested that the app stores are the best place to check for ages. But I think as someone in the tech industry, it's really important that we honor privacy and safety at the same time, which is something obviously really hard when we go up against big tech. So there are still questions about age verification, but we need to balance those with child safety. So we can't rely on tech platforms and compliance by the tech industry. What I think we also need to do is, in comparison to the size of the problem, we need to see serious investment in online safety education, research, and technology. There needs to be wraparound services for every New Zealand family, education and tools. So effective blocking mechanisms are going to need to play a role. There's currently millions of combinations of apps, websites, and platforms. And one of the best ways to address these is through robust voluntary family filters. So filters are effective at reducing accidental exposure to sexual content through search engine results and ads, and they're also effective at blocking websites that host child sexual abuse material. So what am I suggesting that's different to what we have currently through the ISPs? So most filters are currently using static block lists, and they aren't keeping up to date with emerging technologies like AI and character AI, and they aren't adding notify apps. So what I can say is that a filter is not effective if it's not kept up to date. There needs to be testing and transparency. So there are schemes like in Australia called the Family Filter Scheme, which SafeSurf is currently certified under. And I believe we need these in New Zealand to be able to measure standards. It's fairly well known now that the big tech are really in an AI arms race against each other. And we're actually in an AI arms race against them for the protection of our children. The other part of innovation is that we can invest in technology to do a lot of the heavy lifting for us, so that we need R&D in the innovation and safety space. We need emerging forensic technology tools that are able to detect AI-generated CSAM and deep fakes. And we need to build early harm indicators so that when harm does take place, we're able to see it scaled quickly to all families.
Okay, so I think we would all agree that schools are real pillars in our communities. And so as a result of being pillars, we have to equip them. Holly highlighted the school filtering situation we currently have. Just to make that clear, we don't even have minimum filtering standards for school Wi-Fi, which means that harmful content can be accessed now within our primary schools. There's also no standard for how devices are used within schools, leaving teachers kind of making it up as they go along based on their own ideas. We need really consistent upskilling of all the relevant professionals. So, for example, a school counsellor, which I was for many years, they need to know about trends like AI companions, or else how do they adequately support the young people, that are undergoing really significant things. Something that could be rolled out, just that next slide, Rory. Something that could be rolled out pretty immediately for harm prevention would be public campaigns. What we'd like to see is a targeting of parents, caregivers, guardians, etc., of 8 to 12-year-olds. So given the data that we have now on grooming, exploitation, gaming experiences, porn exposure, we teach kids to call 111 if someone's in trouble, but we aren't teaching them what to do if someone asks for an image of them online, which creates a lot of harm and trauma for them. So we know what kind of education works now, and we really know what doesn't. Kids need to hear the same instruction between 4 to 8 times for something simple like don't tell people online your home address. So they need to hear that 4 to 8 times. But they need to hear something 8 to 15 times for more complex messages like identifying signs of grooming, relationships that don't have their best interests at heart. 8 to 15 times. One-off education chats are not going to work. So we need really consistent communication with our young people in order to make a sustained long-term kind of generational difference. I'm going to close with this next quote. This is from Common Sense Media. If we don't act now to keep up with rapid changes in how kids use technology, the mental health and well-being of an entire generation is at stake. I would argue we've left an entire generation behind already, and we've got another opportunity now with this generation, those who are under 14. This quote you can see is already 2 years old. So we're going to stop the slide there.
Thank you. As you said earlier on, Rory, I think we could keep on talking for a long time about this, and it's been really great. Thanks, Sarah, for facilitating that too. And thank you so much, Jo and Rory and Holly. I think you've raised a whole lot of, you've captured a whole lot of really important information that we need to know, but it was also really good to hear that we can be learning from what's happening overseas, and that there are solutions. And I really love how you talked, from the international to the family and the local community solutions. So yeah, thank you so much for that. And just to let people know, we'll put this session on our website along with the slide deck, if that's okay with you. And when we get the link to the published report, we'll put that on there as well. So thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time and for sharing all your research and insights and recommendations with us. And thanks everybody who's been watching today. Please let us know what other sessions you would like in the future. We'll be back in October with a session that hasn't been finalised yet, but it will be there. So look out for the invite on LinkedIn and on our website, and also get onto our email list so that you can be sent the information about these evidence to practice sessions. And so I'll close now with karakia and let you get on with your day. And hopefully see you all again soon. Kia tau te rangamari e ki runga ina iwi Aotearoa. Haumie, hui, tai ki e. Thanks everyone. Go well.
Thank you.